Yeah, as Katerina said, my main field of research is BO, Bayesian optimization, applied to any type of industrial applications, not only machine learning. And today I will talk about something that is almost unrelated to that. No, that's not true. In the end, you will see some glimpse of Bayesian optimization. But yeah, so I will discuss about how to use LLMs. I've heard some questions about LLMs in the previous session, so I hope this is going to be interesting for you. But for a specific task, which is design of algorithms. So first of all, yeah, nice to meet you. This is me, and the one at the top in the picture. Yeah, so I'm assistant professor in the Netherlands, and as I anticipated already, I work in Bayesian optimization, algorithm selection, design selection and configuration, dynamic configuration of algorithms, and all of these applied specifically to engineering design tasks, which likely was what brought me closer and closer to the algorithm design and ML community. So thanks to these applications, I decided that I was a little bit tired of applying ready solutions to yet another problem, and I wanted to have some active role in the design of algorithms and their configuration. So what are the applications in mechanics I deal with? It is mainly related to crashworthiness, and maximization of energy absorption of impact attenuators, optimization of car chassis, of material distributions like composite materials, for example, and so on. I am part of the natural computing cluster at LIACS. LIACS is the Leiden Institute of Advanced Computer Science, and I really want to show this slide to you because what I'm going to present today is joint effort of many people in our group. Here you only see listed the head of the group, Thomas Beck, and the assistant professors or affiliated guest researchers. What are our research areas are efficient learning algorithms, benchmarking and analysis of optimization heuristics, Bayesian optimization, logistics, and explainable AI, and in the end, LLMs, and coupled with evolutionary computation. So this is like quite a recent research direction in the last 2 years, but we go quite proud of that. So as you might have understood, I'm coming from a slightly different perspective from maybe other speakers at this school. So thanks for inviting me. But for me, it's super important to understand where you are, guys, because then I can understand a little bit how to steer the talk, what to stress more, what to stress less. So if you agree, I have a couple of questions for you, and then we will start with the talk so that I can actually have a glimpse on what your background is and what you need more information on. Maybe I can move a little bit faster on some topics rather than others and so on. I will start with a little bit of motivation about to understand why we need at this point some automatic generation of algorithms and also some background information of what evolutionary computation is. I will have a couple of slides about what is out there about automated algorithm discovery or how LLMs are currently used for that. Then this talk is a little bit like in between some pedagogic talk because I want you to learn something, but also some research talk, because I will show some results that we got, and specifically about this new framework, which is LaMIA, which is LLM enhanced evolutionary search for automatic algorithm generation. Then I will show LaMIA results on BBOB. So BBOB is a benchmarking suite, which you didn't mention. So I will also say a couple of words about that. Then we also ran Lamia together with SMEC to optimize the hyperparameters of the generated algorithms, code bases. And there will be something about that. And then here it is for the one person who wanted to know more about Bayesian optimization in this talk, Lamia for generating Bayesian optimization algorithms. Then, if I have time, there will be a very short tutorial on Lamia for the design of machine learning code bases. And I will finish with some conclusions. So, let's start with the motivation. Black box optimization, this is like keyword that you have already heard about, so I will move a little bit fast here. Essentially, why black box? Because actually it's a type of optimization that doesn't rely on any analytical formulation of the target that you are optimizing, or the constraints that your problem might have, or even if you have some mathematical formulation of your target, maybe it's not easy or impossible to extract gradients, so you cannot do any gradient-based search. So the only insight that you may have inside the problem is through queries. So you have some input configuration, and you know that by inserting it into this magic box, you are gonna get the output value for that specific input configuration, right? Can you think about some real-world problems where you want to optimize, and this is the scenario you are in? Any optimization problem. You want to optimize the shifts in a restaurant, and you want to understand which employees should come at what time. I don't know. And then based on the team that you have on that day and that hour, these are I don't know. This is the money that you earn from the clients at the restaurant. I don't know. So you have an input configuration, which is how the shifts are organized, and then the output is how much you're earning from that time slot at the restaurant, right? Of course, it's not only based on this, because it's more like there is some periodicity, right? More clients for dinner than for lunch and so on. But these are all like lateral factors that can also influence that. You want more people if there are more people working, if there are more clients at the restaurant, right? So you can organize it differently. Or here you can see a couple of examples which are more related to my application domain. So some fluid dynamics, an airfoil shape here. Here, I don't know if you can see anything, but it's essentially a part of a car chassis, which is impacted with a pole from the orthogonal direction, and you want to minimize the intrusion and the energy absorption, the intrusion actually here of the structure, the external structure into the chassis. Consider that you are doing a car crash, right? And the chassis' role is not to deform, right? Because then there are other car components like an impact attenuator, which is at the front of this crashing car, which has the task of absorbing the energy, right? But for a car chassis, you just want it not to deform if there is an impact, or not as much in such a way, like to the extent that the occupant is injured, right? So these are all types of real-world problems where no analytical formulation is available for the optimization, right? So everything is based on an external simulator. You have a CAD model of the component or the assembly that you want to optimize, and you run the numerical simulation that can take hours or days, like in the case of a full car, right, that you crash in order to complete. And then out of this simulation, you might extract, okay, what was the energy absorbed, right? What was the intrusion of the external structure, of the external pole into the structure, and so on. So the mathematical formula that you see here is unknown, okay? And this is the context where we are working right now for the rest of the presentation. Is this logical to you, right? As possible scenarios where you need to apply black box optimization. So very important, Yeah?
Just to clarify, like, I mean, if I can set up a simulation, I know stuff about the system, right? So it's not entirely black box. So you're saying I'm not using any of these?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It is indeed the case, as you say. But for example, like in industry, it can be quite likely that the person who knows about the system is not the person who performs the optimization study. And this knowledge cannot be transferred from department to department. This is an option. Or, even more likely, the knowledge you have about the system is specific to that configuration, right? If you change a little bit like the geometric characteristics, the material characteristics or something, it's not that straightforward to go read into the black box, which is your CAD model, and to understand how this relates, so what's the correlation between your properties, the in-model properties, and the output in the target, right? So if you have a certain number of elements, joints, or whatever from your model, it's not that straightforward to understand that the absorbed energy will be some number.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if I had an analytical form of the solution, I would do.
Yes, exactly. But this is not the case. So also, but this is a very important question because this is the role of explainable AI, right? Sometimes you have some knowledge about your problem and we just don't use it. We just want techniques that are able to address any type of possible scenarios, right? And we address as black boxes problems that might not entirely be. So like there are gray boxes approaches, for example, that half use or partially use this information that you have. But you really need to understand how they relate to each other. But thank you for the question. So assuming that we are not using any of that information, very important is the definition of cost, right? So according to how costly, how expensive is your simulation, you might decide to go for one optimization technique rather than another one, okay? So for example, Bayesian optimization needs model tuning, and as the number of samples that you have available increase, also the complexity of the model increases and so on. So it's quite expensive, like the algorithmic skeleton itself is quite expensive, right? So if you have a super cheap function to evaluate, most probably you will not go with an algorithm that is quite heavy, but you would go with an evolution strategy because you can do millions, maybe billions, no, thousands or hundreds of thousands of evaluations, right? So it's a trade-off. If your objective function is cheap, this is the way, for example. If it's expensive, you don't really care about the overhead brought by the algorithm definition because just one evaluation, it's going to take 1 day. So you don't really care about the epsilon more or the amount that you might lose in computational time due to the algorithm definition. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. So when we talk about cheap functions, it's like thousands of evaluations or even hundreds of evaluations. And when thousands or more or hundreds of thousands. And when we talk about costly function evaluation, usually it's on the order of hundreds, okay, more or less 200. Which you will see, for example, this budget is also a budget that you will see recurrent in the presentation when using LLM's prompts. So we won't have like a huge amount of evaluations for that. And there are algorithms that address this type of scenarios, and it's called, they're called meta-heuristics. And what is it exactly is a procedure, like a computational, so not theoretical, it's like computational procedure that determines the most convenient way to find a solution, like a near optimal solution, and try to leverage the information that you have until that moment, okay? Let's say that you have 50 evaluations and you want to understand how to leverage that information in order to find a new solution which might be of better quality. But the question here is, as I said, it's a trade-off, right, between what's the problem that you are addressing, what is the portfolio of your algorithm, so what are the capabilities of the algorithm, so what algorithm is best? Does an algorithm that wins over all of them exist or not? So many people in the last century or now thought that we have an engineering process that works quite well, which is how organisms evolve in time, right? And this is defined by Dennett, as you see here, as a mindless mechanism that can generate complexity, intelligence, and even consciousness without the need for a designer or central planning. So in natural, like in biological evolution, species evolve just understanding what is convenient, what genes are convenient to pass over and what genes are not automatically in order to survive, right? And this is something that amazed computer scientists in the last century, and this is where the field of evolutionary computation comes from. Can we actually replicate this perfect functioning into a computational version so that our algorithms can use the same mechanisms to find optimal solution and to evolve in time, the solution in time? So here, as Caterina said before, there is a little bit of intersection between what machine learning is and what natural computation is, and where the first part of the talk is gonna be positioned, which is about evolutionary computation. So machine learning contains as a category all those algorithms that and systems that want to learn from data, right? And natural computation or natural computing is all of those algorithms that are inspired by nature. So for example, Darwinian evolution. Then if you want to intersect those, you can actually build algorithms that both learn from data and are inspired by nature. And like the mechanisms, the natural mechanisms that are here considered are like, for example, neural mechanisms. For example, if you consider like the simplest neural networks, starting from the Hopfield networks or the simple perception, multi-layer perception, like the oldest ones, these are all like inspired by our neural characteristics. And evolutionary computation, so you might have approaches at the intersection of the two fields, which are inspired by population evolution mechanisms, for example, swarm mechanisms, I don't know, genetic traits rather than neural. And this is where we are gonna position the discussion today. So I mentioned meta-heuristics. I zoomed into evolutionary algorithms, and these evolutionary algorithms can be of different categories: differential evolution, genetic algorithms, evolution strategies, and each of these is characterized by specific properties. If you want a gentle and a very sweet introduction to evolutionary computation, you can actually go check this YouTube video. For now, I will just use it to explain the single steps of evolutionary computation. So it was inspired, as I said, by the survival of the fittest, because you might have under some environmental conditions that that, for example, for predators or climate reasons, some species are weaker than others and do not survive, or some individuals are weaker than others within the species and do not survive. So we want to exploit this type of reasoning in evolutionary computation, which by now I think you understood what it is. And what we need an encoding of the solution and of our parameter configuration. We need a function to evaluate the fitness, the quality of the solutions, and its initialization of an initial population, selection, mutation operators, and reproduction operators. So all of this is summarized in the generic let's say, the generic overview, generic pseudocode for an evolutionary algorithm, which is cyclic, right? So you start from a population, you evaluate, like, what's the quality of the individuals in the population, right? And then you select the ones which are more promising, the strongest ones, for example. Then you recombine. You can recombine only in a smaller pool, only the good ones. And then you mutate, right? Because mutation is also something that characterizes the evolution of species. So you mutate the genes, so the encoded genes. And then after these two phases, you reevaluate what you have. And then you do like another selection in order to have the population, not the initialization one, but another population from which you can select for the following generation. Okay? So it's like a lot of big offspring, right, of individuals, and only the strongest survive. And from the strongest, you select essentially. You recombine them, and then after mutation, you select the ones which perform best. Okay? Any questions on this? Because this is the mechanism that will be given for granted for the rest. Yeah?
Why does it lead to consciousness? I was very surprised about that comment earlier.
Why doesn't lead to consciousness?
Why does it?
Does it?
I don't think so. There's nothing that is with consciousness.
It could be, right? For example, let's say that through generations, you can move a little bit back. You can have multiple generations at the same time. And maybe the offspring can see that the grandfathers that was fit could actually, I don't know, fight against lions, I don't know, and the one that was not like strong enough actually didn't survive. So it can be like a motivation for the offspring to train and be strong, because they kind of know what are the environmental conditions. So some mutations are not consciously chosen, some are, but to some extent, even if the single individuals are not conscious about what are the characteristics that make them survive, the underlying process knows, right? Because the fitness that you evaluate, okay, this individual dies, this individual survives, somehow is a certain consciousness that you have within the process. So just pushing forward the ones which are good is a conscious way of evolving to some extent. But you're welcome. Thank you for the question. But there is no like big power at the top, right? Everything comes like just naturally. So this is just a glimpse of the pseudocode. Initialization of the population. As I said, there could be like, so these are screenshots of the video if you want to see that. You can have smaller, bigger, stronger, harder, standard individuals, and each of them with their characteristics. And then you recombine this the best, let's say, based on their score, individuals. And out of the recombination, there is some offspring popping out. And then you mutate the genes of the offspring, right? And then this offspring is in the environment, thrown into the environment, and only the strong ones go ahead, right? So the strong ones go ahead, and essentially, I was here already. Sorry, this is the population, okay, all the kids. And then you go ahead, you evaluate it. It can be climate conditions, predators, or just others, I don't know, other people from the same species, other organisms from the same species, and so on. Only the good ones survive. And then these ones meet again, and there is a new population, okay? Good? Perfect. Now, this was supposed to be not only an introduction, but also a motivation for my talk, right? Why do we need algorithms if the evolutionary computation in the last decades came up with an easy bestiary which is a set of nature-inspired algorithms covering hundreds of different versions of algorithms, like particle swarm optimization. There are at least 50 versions of that by changing only a teeny tiny bit of the code base, right? Or the gray wolf algorithm, or the firefly, whatever. So you can find any type of algorithm out there, and every year to journals there is yet another research group who submits another metaphor-based algorithm, right? And those papers should be accepted just because they change a tiny bit the code from a particle swarm optimization, and they work comparable or better in some of the algorithms that are, test cases that are available in the benchmarking suites. Of course not, but then I said, okay, if people keep doing that, why don't we just ask an LLM to actually merge definitions from this type of algorithms and come up with an algorithm which performs by validation, so we are quite sure that it performs well, and it's also interpretable because we can have, for example, the code generated for designing that algorithm and tunable. So why don't we just have a loop, an evolutionary loop, and an LLM that allows us to have an algorithm that is just more efficient than all the alternatives or comparable to some from the EC bestiary. These are 294 algorithms, actually, so a lot. And now, like nowadays, we have like very good techniques for benchmarking. It is a key component in the meta-heuristic fields, and it's useful to understand which interplay between algorithm and problem is the winning one. Because there is no algorithm for the no free lunch theorem which beats all the other ones on all of the test beds that you might consider. Okay, so we cannot really hope to have like the winning algorithm everywhere, but you can hope to understand how to configure and how to choose your algorithms for the specific setting that you're working in. IOH Profiler and Experimenter is a benchmarking platform. Maybe if you like, you can go check it out. That is useful for such a purpose, and it is composed by two blocks. IOH Experimenter that allows you to import benchmarks for continuous mixed integer discrete optimization problems and run your algorithms on those. And then you can obtain performance data from the algorithm runs. And then after that, you can actually evaluate with opportune post-processing what the performance is. Coco Bebop is another benchmarking suite which is super used, overused in our community to the extent that we start to think that maybe we are overfitting the methods to this type of suites, which is not that good. And this is what is not generalization, for example, right? Like if some algorithms work very well on a specific group of problems, then they do not generalize to other scenarios. But at least why is this still useful for preliminary studies? Because it contains a lot of functions that can be unimodal, multimodal, separable, not separable, ill-conditioned, rotated, scaled, and so on. So you can change the location of the optimum from instance to instance. So it can give quite a nice diversity in the benchmarks that you deal with. Here two examples, the sphere function at the top at different dimensions, 5, 10, 20, and the Gallagher function here. So you see how the multimodality of the landscape changes. Now, going back to the empirical study on the EC bestiary and how it performs on Bebop, this is an interesting result that we got. So we consider just the Bebop continuous functions. These are 1 to 24 single objective continuous functions and different dimensionalities. And we compared the EC bestiary algorithms, 256, if I remember, 294 algorithms And these numbers are the number of algorithms that for that specific setting are outperformed by random search. So if you just randomly test parameter configurations until your budget is exhausted, for example, for function 11, dimension 10, 140 algorithms out of 294 are just beaten by random search, which is quite like, I mean, it's an alarm, right? We should definitely think a little bit more about what we are doing. So, by now, I hope you have some type of background. Any questions about this?
Where did the functions come from again?
They come from the Coco Bebop benchmarking suite. Okay, I can show that to you later. There is like a nice documentation page, and they were tested through the IOH experimenter framework, which allows easy access and logging of the information during the search.
It comes from the benchmarking suite on which the algorithms actually should have been tested on.
Yes, but they were not, maybe.
They were actually not, okay, apparently.
Or partially. Like this is one problem in also the ML community, or that's why we are very interested in developing like fair benchmarks, right? Because if I receive some submission to review, right, and then that algorithm or that framework was evaluated on problems that are completely different from the ones that are established in the community or just partially present some test cases and so on, how can I judge the effectiveness of that method compared to others, right? So you really need some systematic way of testing. Right?
Otherwise, you should cherry pick.
Yeah, indeed. You could just show a Clay function because your algorithm performed better, right? So we nowadays are very focused on trying to avoid that. Thank you. Can this be done automatically? There have been a few efforts in the last 2 years, I would say, so quite recent with the introduction of large language models, to use large language model prompts to guide some evolutionary research to generate pieces of codes to plug into frameworks in such a way that, that these new code bases perform better than what is available in the literature. And how has been done this? I mean, these are just a few examples. You might be familiar with that. Fun search, okay? So Google DeepMind was like the first one, I guess, if not the first one, that was one of the more renowned attempts to do that. So given some specific problem like this, mainly combinatorial problems or discrete or integer sequences, the LLM is asked, so this is the problem specification and there is a hole that I want to fill, right? So how should I fill this hole with a block of code in such a way that I have an optimal solution for my problem? And essentially they do that. How many of you know what fun search is? 1, 2, okay, good. 3, okay. So what they do, given the problem specification, they use a pre-trained LLMs, and then given this pre-trained LLM, some code bases are evaluated against the problem specification. You might have some, based on the problem specification, you might have some metrics, which can be runtime, quality of the solution, whatever. And then you have a program's database, and based on like the best, again, evolution, right? The best code bases that you have, you can actually build another prompt that asks for modification of the code base that was generated, right? And then they were selected. And this goes again into the pre-trained LLM, and it's a loop until some termination criterion is satisfied, and you have your new program, okay? And following fun search from the same, important difference between this and what we did is that you need a placeholder, right? As I said, you need a specific part of code that you want to replace, Okay, you don't generate a full code base from start to end, a full algorithm. Evolution of heuristics from the same authors extended to multi-objective, for example, also definition of evolving acquisition functions, and so on. It was inspired by fan search, and they also provide with EOH also natural language summaries of the code, so they add some interpretability layer on what is done. It was used to generate small heuristics, and again, small heuristics that compose parts of the pipeline of a full optimization loop. Okay, so for example, yesterday you saw Bayesian optimization. There is the initialization, there is the modeling part, there is the acquisition function optimization, and you might, for example, generate heuristics for these sub-blocks of the whole optimization pipeline. And it was mainly focused on online bin packing, so combinatorial, TSP, and so on. Then Re-Evo from 2024 adds some interesting aspects to that, which is a meta level of reflection, meaning the LLM is not only prompted to generate code iteratively, but it's also prompted to reflect on what it has done. So it's like some human being actually checking the code that was produced and say, okay, this works well because it added, or like the difference between the previous version and this version is adding sampling, I don't know, around the origin, right? Which is something that sometimes helps because some problems are biased towards the origin, and say, okay, but this is actually brings a bias. So it's some self-reflection on the generated algorithms. Again, it was used for small heuristics, just 10, 15, 20 lines of codes, and to improve already existing algorithms, not to generate new ones, mainly for combinatorial optimization, and it is quite expensive, right? Because you have a lot of LLM prompts at each iteration. Very recent is AlphaEvolve. And it is very similar to, yes?
Very quick. Can you comment on the difference to what people call chain of thought? Like, just bring it into the context, because like what one could think about is that, I mean, chain of thought is also a iterative process, and at some point I want to start stuff.
Yes, what is though the underlying principles for evolution of I'm not super familiar, like so maybe we might discuss later, but I think that could be a little bit more scope generic, and also the underlying principle for building this chain might differ from what I'm presenting right now, but the answer is no. I would need to go look at that, at the specific definitions. But thank you. Okay, so it's very similar to Lamea, which I'm going to present now. But it's not open source nor reproducible. And yeah, came later, so maybe you can try both and let me know what happens. Lambo, this is a Bayesian optimization framework, again, where only pieces of codes, as I was mentioning before, initialization, candidate sampling, surrogate model fitting, and so on, is done by an LLM. So the LLM is not used to build the code base. I mean, it's not used to build an algorithm, to define an algorithm, but to replace blocks in the pipeline. So instead of using a Gaussian process regression, you use an LLM, which predicts, for example, what is the value of the ejecting function on unseen locations. Blade, just mentioning that it is like a new benchmarking framework specifically for LLM-generated code bases. And I will move on, because I really want to tell you how Lamea works, which was by Nikki Van Stein and other people from our group, so that you can actually have a clearer idea. So there is an initialization phase where you have your problem specification, role specification, and you initialize the population, the first parent individual of your evolution strategy. Okay? Then, until a stopping criteria is met, you synthesize new algorithms through opportune prompting. You load the algorithms, and within the loop, there is an extensive benchmarking on the bebop functions that you saw before, okay? But this can be changed, and you will see some examples of that. So we extensively use it, benchmark the baselines, not on one problem for which it was defined, but on a full suite of problems with different mathematical characteristics using IOH experimenter. Then we actually see, does it give errors? Does it not? And what is the anytime performance of this baseline that was generated? We have some history update, and then we can actually redefine the code bases based on mechanisms coming from evolution strategies, right? So elitism, mutation, recombination, detailed feedback by the LLM, and so on. And we do this until we reach some stopping criterion. Here there is a pseudocode for that, which is essentially the equivalent. I don't know if they will have the slides, maybe if so, it's just the equivalent of the flowchart that you saw before. And here you can see when the evaluation, the thorough evaluation on many test cases is done at which point of the pseudocode, and the number of total generation loop is set to 100. Here you have the type of prompts that you might use, or that we used, and you might modify if you want to generate other types of algorithms, which is, for example, saying to the LLM, your task is to design novel meta-heuristics, which are algorithms to solve black box optimization problems. The optimization algorithm should handle a wide range of tasks, which is evaluated on a large test suite, blah, 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 blah. And the feedback should look like this. This is the algorithm that I generated with this value of the performance metric, which is the area over the convergence curve. And based on that, it can either redefine completely, restart, or refine the algorithm that was the best until that point. Questions about how Lamia works? No, good. Okay, here are some results. As a performance metric, we use as I said, the area over the convergence curve, which is a way to evaluate anytime performance, right? Because this evolution has two levels. You have the evolution through the LLM, and then at each generation, you have some individuals, and these individuals are algorithms, right? And these algorithms need to be tested on a specific setting. So some total budget, some dimensionality, and so on. Some search space. And in order to evaluate how good that solution is, it is evaluated across 24 functions, many instances, and so on. You can consider the average area over the curve. What does it mean? It means I don't have a marker, right? But in general, like, yes, I have. Good. This is a whiteboard, I guess. Okay, so if this is like one algorithm that you generated, tested on one setting, you can have, for example, the loss or regret as the quality metric, and you might have the total budget of evaluations here, right? So you can actually say, this is the single candidate solution, right? It's nothing to do with the LLM. It's the solution suggested by the LLM at certain point in time. So this algorithm that we generate brings this type of convergence. We want to minimize because the loss is our target. Then we don't only want a curve which is good at the end of the budget, but we want a curve, so like one curve like this is to be preferred to an algorithm generating this curve, because not only reaches the same final values, but it also reaches something that is very close to it in a very small evaluation budget, right? So in order to do that, what we do is considering the area over the curve given some upper bound. And the bigger this area, the best the overall, the anytime performance of the algorithm is.
That would also imply that you're finding an algorithm which converges very quickly at the beginning,
Yeah.
but has not the same conversions at the very end, right?
Yes, and this could be potentially preferred, yeah, based on the area
Why
over the
would you
curve.
prefer that? Because this is not, if I'm solving an optimization problem, eventually I would like to find the optimal solution, right? Then I
Which
was
you know
surprised
you-
that I was very quick, but if I have not found the optimal at the end, then maybe not so good.
Yeah, depending on the problem that you have, right? Sometimes you have a limited budget, and having a quick convergence which gives you like a small worsening of the final solution can be also beneficial. Like in engineering, I many times I've listened to people saying, yes, I don't really care if the angle of two beams, I don't know, let's say I have a support here, classical topology optimization problem, and I have a load here. I don't really care if I have two beams, if these beams are like this or like this, okay? Most probably this is worse than this one, because the more you make the support, the attachment to the support spread over the support, the better it is, right? But in general, the engineer knows that an optimal topology is a V structure. So they don't really care about finding the exact optimum, but within a limited amount of time, they want to have an insight so for these cases, it can be also good. Yeah, but in general, it's always a trade-off. Something which is very far off won't be considered, right, in the end. So, but thank you for the question. So here are results on different types of evolution strategies used and the language model. And from already, the metric is the mean area over the convergence curve. You can see even if the results are quite overlapping, you can see the uncertainty forks. Still, the performance very much depends on what model, so it's model dependent, and also a little bit on the type of evolution strategy that you are using, if it's elitist or not. Elitist means that you also take the parent designs to generate the new offspring individuals, so it's a little bit more conservative. Non-elitist, it means that only the individual of the offspring is used as parent individuals for the next generation. And here you can see LAMIA compared to EOH, evolution of heuristics, which I introduced before, and compared to just random search with LLM prompting. And you can see that there is some improvement. One interesting part is that we also asked to generate names for the new heuristics, like the people in the bestiary do. So the most creative names just came out, which could be EREDS, quantum flux ultra refined. There is nothing about quantum in there actually, but it is the mechanism, since there is like a temperature parameter, it reminds me a little bit of simulated annealing and also quantum annealing, so maybe that's for that reason. Dynamic firework optimizer, surrogate assisted, blah, 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 blah. And it was a nice and interesting analysis for us to understand what are the pairwise differences in the codes that are generated. So here you see, for example, for each point in this iteration, like each tick in the x-axis, each unit is a pair between parent and offspring individuals. And what you see on the y-axis is a diversity metric that tells us how diverse was the code generated as parent and used as parent from the code generated as offspring. So you can actually see that some of the model, here we have it with GPT-4, GPT 3.5, GPT 4.0. You can see, for example, that some of them, like 3.5, for example, or is much more conservative than for example, 4, right? So you can see that it goes much down. So the difference is minor, is lower than 4-4. So it's also useful to see how conservative the models that we are using make our search, and what is the trade-off between exploration and exploitation, even if it's a concept from Bayesian optimization, but also in this case, if you want like a model which is more explorative than exploitative, maybe you should dynamically choose one, which is not something we have done yet. And this is, yeah?
How do you think this does depend on your prompt?
Yeah.
Like, maybe some other prompts, like, 3.5 to doing more, or like, I don't know.
This is true. Is quite prompt and task dependent because, for example, also the pre-training of, these models can have different type of knowledges also, right? So it can be that for some task, one model could be more conservative than another one. If you have some use case to try, you can do that and see if this conservative approach changes. But what I show now, it's based on our study, of course. But yeah, it can actually depend on that. Another way to assess the similarity is based on not only on the number of code lines. So maybe one thing to observe here is that the difference reduces with the evaluations, right? So naturally, regardless of which model you use, as the search proceeds, you tend to fine-tune a solution much more rather than exploring a completely different algorithm design, which is observable. But yeah, I think that the differences between models are much more evident. And this is like a similar analysis. And again, 3.5 seemed to be the most conservative. In this case, the y-axis is the Yarrow difference between names. So we generate the names, and we can actually understand how different is the name of the child from the name of the parent, right? So for example, if you have, Bayesian optimization, not in this case, if you have CMAES, and then if you have CMAES-DS, there is like an incremental modification of the name, which most probably also relates to an incremental modification of the code base, right? Because it adds some characteristics to the method. So this is also like a good way to understand from the names that are generated how explorative is the search aided by the LLM. Here are some results on the 5-dimensional bebob functions. Here, this is an algorithm generated by us. Somewhere there is the CMAES, which is the blue line. You can see that these is tested on a bigger bunch of functions than the ones that were used for generating the algorithm. Let's say that out of 24 functions, we evaluated the in-the-loop evaluation of the LLM guided search is done on 5 and only a couple of instances, right? And then we validate the algorithms that were generated on the full benchmarking suite and different instances. So here are the results on that, on the big test suite. And you can see that some generated baselines beat standard ones. Then the question comes natural. Does this extend to 10D and 20D? The answer is partially, because the algorithms were generated to 5D, right, for 5D problems. And 5D is, like the dimensionality, is a big characteristic of the setting that you are addressing. So do these baselines that were generated generalize scale for higher dimensions? And the answer is partially, even if at the end, especially for more complicated multimodal with a weak global structure function landscapes, CMAES, which is the blue line, and CMAES best, the blue lines, are still ruling. So still some work to do. Here is an example of the pseudocode of one of the generated algorithm, the quantum-inspired one. And you can completely transparently see how the workflow of the algorithm is. So the entire code from start to end is given back to you. So you have an initialization phase, an increasing of the mutation rate, then you pick 3 individuals from the population uniformly at random, you combine, how do you combine with crossover and mutation operators. The update of the best is done, and then you have also a memory vector which is updated and so on. So for each algorithm you have an interpretation and the transparent implementation of what goes on, and you by also comparing the commits, you can also see how the modifications happen from parent to child. I think that what is interesting is that these LLMs, as you see on the top right, even if they do not perform at this stage yet a full HPO study on what is the baseline that is generated, do actually some, they do some HPO when generating offspring from parent design. So they also change the hyperparameter together with the hyperparameters if the 2 methods are similar from previous to following generations, and not only generate a completely new algorithms, right? So some type of HPO is done within the automatic generation of algorithms. But if you want to do HPO, there is also some follow-up which adds SMEC on top of the algorithm generation. So for each algorithm that the LLM-aided evolutionary loop generates, we also perform HPO on the hyperparameters defining this new baseline. Here are some results. HPO, of course, deteriorates the performance in terms of benchmark evaluations because you need many more evaluations to do HPO. But in terms of, like for the same number of LLM prompts, because you don't need any LLM prompts for doing HPO, it's performed through SMEC. You have like an immediate enhancement of the performance and comparable performance in the end. So if you're dealing with a problem which is not that expensive, HPO helps. Questions? Yeah.
Yes, so I'm not fully understood how to read that curve. So at the very beginning now on the left, LLM prompts. So you have no large language evolution done so far, but you only took the original algorithm, applied the HPO to it, and it already jumped up so much?
Yeah.
That's how I have to read that?
Yeah. So, but then
the action you're getting by really involving the algorithm seems very small.
So you still generate, like you say, from iteration 0, essentially.
Zero, where the large language has not done anything.
No, it has done.
Very close to the optimum already, right?
You are generating already like a first algorithm. Like every time that you perform HPO, it comes before the algorithm design phase comes.
Okay, but then it means so you need a large language model to generate once an algorithm, and then doing HPO on top, and they're very close already to the optimum.
In this case, yes.
Okay, interesting.
So it's a quite powerful. So also if you consider HPO alone without any algorithm generation, you can see already the gap. Of course, like this is on 5D problems and so on. So like, but yeah, it really enhances the performance since the very beginning of the evolution. Then you have only some minor refinement. But yeah, of course, if you are interested on considering the number of evaluations,
Sure.
yeah. So I wouldn't use it to optimize a crash box, for example. Here, I don't have a lot of time left, but here is the extension to other types of problems. So Lamia used 2 other types of problems, for example, the online bin packing and the traveling DTSP NPR problem. And yeah, here you can see that indeed we compare Lamia, standard Lamia, to Lamia HPO in terms of LLM prompts, right? Sorry, in terms of the objective value, but against LLM prompts and evolution of heuristics. And here you can see that indeed Lamia HPO improves the results. Same for the TSP problem in blue. When you look at the evaluations, you can see from these CDD plots that the differences between the final solutions are not really statistically, so they're not statistically significantly diverse. But yeah, in general, the conclusion is that Lamia HPO generates algorithms on pair to AOH, but the number of LLM prompts that it uses is much lower, because if you remember, EOH was using a lot of LLM prompting. And in the end, if you measure in terms of LLM prompts, it's convenient. If you measure in terms of evaluation, it is comparable. So comparable performance with lower cost. Yeah?
Since you know maybe like more classical problems from computer science, how does this perform against the well-known heuristics for implementation which are rather performance for many of these problems?
Yeah, I don't have it on these slides, but we have those results, and it is, I mean, it really depends, but on the instance that you use of that problem, but they are either comparable or sometimes even better. Yeah. So maybe I can point you. There is like a paper on this, so maybe you can go check it out. Yeah, here. So, of course, I mean, like, there are also well-known certified solutions for those problems, right? So I'm not saying like better than that, but compared to equivalent heuristics used to solve those problems, yes.
Well-known certified solutions are the heuristics, because there are these reductions to linear integer problem that enable you to solve the problem in an over-approximation in really fast time.
Mm-hmm.
These are the solutions I think we can compare to. Get a probabilistic synthesis.
Yeah.
Then where are you candidates?
So honestly, I was not part of this study, but if you go check this paper here at the bottom, I think that, yeah, you will find your answers. But thank you for your question. Okay, so last part is about Bayesian optimization algorithms. So we used Lamia BO with a slightly modifying prompting to generate BO baselines. These are examples of diversity prompts, mutation prompts, and crossover prompts that we used on top of the generated algorithms. Some, in this case, we evaluated more ES configurations, so 1 + 1 ES, 4, 16, 8 + 16. And you can see that 4, 16 non-elitist performs quite well and on par almost with 8 + 16. So based on this was the performance of the best generated algorithms on Bebop, on the full suite. So here you can see CMAES, Hibo, Turbo, and Vanilla BO from BioTorch, which are some competitors for continuous single objective optimization. And here you see in orange the baselines that we generated. And you can see that some of the generated baselines, like Trivol or ATRBO, overall have a performance which beats the baselines one. And like considering also some PERT test, statistical testing, like for dimension 5 and 10, even if it was trained only on 5, it is statistically significant improvement. Then we said, okay, it's easy to evaluate a method on the benchmarking suite even if extended that you use to generate the method, right? Like, okay, we are using 24 functions rather than 5. We are considering other instances, but yeah, maybe does this extend? Here, the cool part is that overall the methods still one of the generated algorithms, even for dimension 40, is better than the baselines. For example, like also baselines that were thought to address high dimensional cases, right? For Bayesian optimization, everything which is above 10, 15, let's say 20 variables is considered high dimensional, and not really, and it's not obvious that an algorithm that was generated for dimension 5 will extend to dimension 40, right? So it's cool to see that the generated algorithms preserve their performance as the dimensionality increases. But then we said, let's check against Lambo, which was a direct competitor, and on another type of tasks. So let's go check what happens on Bayes-Mark. So in this case, we have tasks which are pairs of a model. So this is a prediction task. So the task is a pair between the model and the data set. Here you see results divided by models. And on tree-based models, for tree-based models, we are outperformed by Lambo, which was one of the algorithms that I introduced at the beginning. But for other ones, we are quite competitive. Here, we only consider 30 evaluations, which is nothing, because Bayesian optimization, it's true that it's known to be beneficial when the evaluation budget is small, but this is particularly small. The reasons why we did that, because we took the Lambo results from their paper, and we had 30 evaluations for that. But it would be interesting to see in the future what happens for larger budgets. But still, we are competitive. You see here, the bold lines are the algorithms generated by us, and the dashed lines are other heuristics.
Generated on the bebop functions?
Yeah, no, on the bebop functions. So with this, we try to see if it generalizes to other tasks that they didn't observe during the generation. Yeah, which honestly, like, it's not like outstanding performance, but it is surprisingly good, in my opinion, given that it was a completely new task. Also here there is something that we cannot explain, even if it's only 3D, but like vanilla BO from BO to Arch was always performing quite bad, and they have it has this, yeah, surprising performance here. Some comments on the CPU time analysis. The generated benchmarks are as fast as Turbo 1. So here, what you see here is a zoom in of this CPU time plot here. So here you can see HIBO, which is quite expensive, Vanilla BO, which is quite expensive, and then overlapping the generated baselines and Turbo 1 and CMAES. And if we zoom in, here you can see the differences. Of course, everything is overlapping, so they are statistically equivalent. But if you check, CMAES is the cheapest. It's not model-based, so there is nothing to lose there in terms of CPU time. But then our baselines are on pair with Turbo 1, which is considered to be super efficient in terms of CPU cost in the BO community. There are no in-the-loop optimization and so on. Okay, so I don't have the time, I guess, right, for the tutorial, but if you want, you can check it out. I just show that to you. It is here. No, it is here. No? Okay, so, where did it go? Okay, not the most convenient setup here I chose. Okay, so this is just some very quick implementation of Lamia for generating ML prediction models. Okay, good. It is like 5 or 6 cells, so it's super quick to test. You install the dependencies, which I didn't have to click now for, but in any case, okay, you install the dependencies, then all the imports, of course. Then you set up the LLM. You need an API key, of course. If you don't have one, you can have a Gemini one for free if you have a Google account. Then it's how you import it, and then you define the evaluation function for Lamia. In this case, we are using, like we want to do a prediction task for breast cancer identification. So we have a database that we import, and then we evaluate we need an evaluation of the quality of the ML model that is generated. And this is the block to do that. Then cell 3 is to define the instruction. So here you define the prompts that you want to provide the LLM with. So whatever is the task that you want to try, you can just change this type of prompts, and it will work for, and also the evaluation metrics, the validation metrics, right? If you change these 2 blocks, then it can be applied potentially, as you saw, to other problems, other tasks as well. And here you actually have the Lamia search, and something that is generated is like this. So the code, for example, the stacking ensemble code, where you have the definition of the train and then the definition of the call, and you can actually have a feedback on the amount of accuracy that it obtained on the test set that you gave it to. They gave to it, and at each, if you download it and actually you run it locally, you also have more outputted information. So maybe you want to try it out, and if you want to do that, there is like another QR code, and if you will have the slides, there is also the link below. But as you saw, it's like 5 cells, and you can have fun and try to use it with other types of tasks. Yes, so I think that I'm gonna conclude here. As you saw, if you're interested in Lamia, this is the QR code to the GitHub. It can effectively find strong algorithms, then compete with the state of the art. Lamia was the first method to generate complete end-to-end algorithms, complete solutions, right? Not just patches within other frameworks, but from start to end, an algorithm that you can run on your problem definition. It can generalize to other tasks and dimensions. It can be considered or interpreted as a let's say, universal modular framework. Depends very much on the prompts and on the LLMs. So it would be interesting to see what happens under yet other scenarios. Works for any type of domain variable nature. Computational cost is still relatively high because you have a lot of LLM calls, and it's prompted often. Yeah, we can control mutation rate, and benchmarking is also a new area when related to LLM-driven algorithm discovery. So this is also something that is worth observing. So let me conclude with the Lamia framework here. Of course, happy to discuss. If you want, I need to thank in particular Nikki Van Stein, because she's the person which is like behind most, like in every of the works that you saw from our group. I was recently involved in the Bayesian optimization, application to Bayesian optimization. So yeah, if you want, you can also reach out to her. And yeah, thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have questions, I'm happy to answer.